10:31 on KTSA with Gang of Four. Now, as far as what's going to happen tomorrow, looks like it's going to go on. There was that whole on-again, off-again, very bizarre sequence of events where he claimed he had negotiated the move of the Ground Zero Mosque, and they said, we don't know what he's talking about. And for once, I think I believe them. But what do we expect tomorrow? I mean, there's everything from people saying it'll be him and his 30 minions, all the way to people saying there's going to be gun fights, and it's going to be like Ruby Ridge or Waco. Or I mean, what is going to happen tomorrow? Kevin, what is your expectation?
There's not. I mean, I just know there's someone going to be there with a camera phone, or someone's. I mean, I know Fox News came out and said they were not going to cover it. You know, to help with this whole saga. You know, someone is going to have a camera out there to make sure that they get the media attention about it. And there again, it just.
Elaine, is it irresponsible though for media people to say we will not cover it when they don't know if it's going to be news or not?
You know, I would certainly have somebody there on site in case. I think at this point you probably do.
Yeah.
It would be sort of irresponsible. Yeah. I mean, hopefully some counter protesters will show up to say this is not what we think America stands for. This is not what we think Christianity stands for, and we don't support this guy. So, you know, it could turn into something, I think, interesting and worthwhile ultimately, but not because of him per se, but because of the response to him.
We hear that it's already being said that there are demonstrations, that there's already been violence. A preacher in a Muslim cleric in Indonesia says this is tantamount to war. So what we're hearing is, here comes the Muslim rage. It's like the Nike sneakers and the Danish cartoons and the Miss World contest. And, you know, these street protesters are perpetually outraged. So it's kind of hard for me to imagine that this is going to change that. I mean, if you're already at level 11...
How are you going to dial it back?
Yeah, right. Who cares? So is this really a game changer in terms of the so-called Muslim rage?
I don't think it's a game changer at all. I
mean, what is it we're worrying about if they're already
exactly? I mean, Jack, what I would really like to see tomorrow is, to Kevin's point, I mean, September 11th is still a very raw day, and I think there's raw emotion still associated with it. I would like us, you know, to reflect on that day in more of a peaceful fashion, and it may be, you know, Pollyanna to be able to say that and ignore this guy. I mean, because, you know, I think the real impact associated with that day gets lost because of all of this hype and rhetoric and, you know, burning. I mean, it's ridiculous at this point. Yeah.
One of the strange things that happened is Sarah Palin almost said something really smart and then undercut herself at the end. But she basically came out and said, look, he absolutely has his right to free speech. And that kind of got lost. I mean, there were people who wanted to shut it down, and I don't think that is the right response either. And she said, you know, he has the right to do it, but it's insensitive. Unfortunately, she then tried to compare what he was doing to the construction of the religious center, and I don't think that's a fair comparison.
Why is that not a fair comparison?
Because you're talking about people who are trying to build, I think, something that is constructive and meant to be a positive presence in the community, as opposed to somebody who's just trying to make a very inflammatory statement for his own.
I would put it a little differently. I would say it's different because the GZM people are building something that's permanent, whereas he's going to burn these Qurans. It's going to be over by noon on Saturday. There's something about putting a structure up where everybody who goes to Lower Manhattan sees it and has to be aware of it, versus doing something in Gainesville, Florida that will be over in a couple of hours, and if you don't care, you can just ignore it.
Well, I do think, I mean, you've been to Lower Manhattan, I've been to Lower Manhattan. There's many, many paths to the World Trade Center sites. You don't have to go past that center if, in fact, you find it offensive. I thought Frank Rich really wrote kind of the best column on it, pointing out there are many things that we would not consider respectful, holy, lovely to have near a site of, you know, a memorial site like that. That's Manhattan. So I don't think, you know, to me, what that religious center ultimately wants to do is positive. It is like, is the 92nd Street Y, is the big Y that's up there as a community outreach center. So it's going to be a long-term good impact if we can get the hype pulled back away from it. So I don't think it's a fair comparison.
The local company Rackspace, which is a big internet hosting company, was hosting the website for the Dove World Outreach Church, Terry Jones Church. Wednesday night, they had to pull, or they said they had to pull that site down because his rhetoric and what he is putting on that site violates their policies about hate speech. Now, clearly, they have the right as a private company to accept and reject the business they want to take and leave. Is that the right thing to do, though? At this moment in time, we're shutting down your website?
I think it depends on the contractual obligation. I think there's a fine line when you talk about free speech, but I think if the church entered into some sort of a contractual obligation with Rackspace that, they weren't going to put out hate speech associated with it, then I do think that's well within the right of Rackspace to be able to take it down if they feel like it's highly offensive or it is hate speech.
They have the right, but is it a good idea? Or does it, again,
Draw more
appear as
attention.
if, oh, look, they're shutting me up. Look what they're doing. Here I am.
Right.
This is free speech. You're supposed to protect it even when it's odious, says the Supreme Court. In a way, Elaine, they're giving him one more,
I know.
piece of ammo.
Well, and here's the other thing that I think it ultimately is going to affect the discussion about net neutrality and really the role that the internet plays.
Yes.
I mean, if the internet is more like our telephones, it's something we really need on a daily basis. It's nowadays how you interact with the world in so many fundamentally important ways. If we decide that there's sort of a basic right to that, I think that has implications for the hosting companies maybe as well as the carriers when it comes right down to it.
It's going to open up a slew of things because then who determines what that is? You know what I'm
Exactly,
saying?
sure.
I mean, now you're starting to
Right.
get into the legalities of, hey, is this hate speech? Is this not hate speech?
Yeah.
And should we shut these people
Exactly.
down? Lawsuits,
Well,
attorneys.
and I was
I
thinking
mean,
that too. I mean, I was thinking, I don't know what else they host, but I'm sure they host
Yes.
all
Yes.
kinds of
Right.
things.
Things they
that
don't
would
even
be-
know.
That we don't
that
even
we
want to talk
find,
about.
Yeah, offensive, grotesque.
Yes.
Right. AT&T can't shut down your iPhone account because they don't like what you're saying, to your friends on the phone. So
I don't know what we've been trying to get somebody from Rackspace to come on because I mean they're a good company and they're good
Sure.
people. I'm wondering just what the internal thinking was. Was it, hey, at some point somebody's going to find out we're the hosting company and we don't want to be attached to the
Associated
story?
with this.
In which case that failed. Or what? I mean, ultimately, I guess to speak to your point, Elaine, I know I would never hold the hosting company responsible for whatever happened on a website. I mean, I'm even having a little trouble holding Craigslist responsible for what's going on right now because to me that's more about the people using it than the company that invented the service. By the way, they say in the Express News article that it was done in a very careful way. They gave the church a lot of notice, and the church was able to export its content before the site was taken down. So they worked with them on that, which would also seem to undercut the idea that we're riding to the rescue and preventing hate speech if you're enabling the hate speech people to move to another site. I don't know. I mean, this guy has presented a number of conundrums, and I wonder if maybe the problem he's pointing out with his behavior, which is kooky, is that we are very unresolved about some things. Here it is 9 years after 9/11, and I don't even think we quite know what to make of this day. Is this a somber holiday? Is this the day we began to fight back against things that we've faced for a long time? Is this a day that we should be mad, a day that we should be sad? I mean, it's a very odd holiday. I'm imagining probably in the way that Pearl Harbor Day, for the first several years that it was marked, probably was a day of much more complexity than it is now. Now we can look at it. It sort of has a postage stamp simplicity to it. We know the basics of what happened. We have the Arizona Memorial. But I imagine in the first few years...
Oh, it had to have been excruciating. I mean, think about it. There are still people that have lost their parents or their sons or their daughters at this, and it was only... It's not that long ago. I mean, if I lost my son 9 years ago, I'm sorry, I'm still thinking about it, and I think rightfully so. But
well, and you have children that have been born since, that never saw one parent, whether it was a mother or whether it was a father.
And if you were to take 9 years after
when I
Pearl
talk about the
Harbor-
emotions still being very, very raw, I mean, I do, Jack. I think it's a huge flood of emotions. I think it's all of those things that you just talked about. I think it's a time that we reflect. It's a time of reflection. I think it's a time for tremendous sadness. I think it's a time of prayer at the same time. I mean, I don't know what everybody was doing during 9/11, but I remember watching Good Morning America. And Diane Sawyer was talking about the fact, she was like, well, there's this big fire out here at the World Trade Center, and there's lots of smoke that's coming up, but we're not quite sure what's going on. It looks like there may have been a plane that crashed into it. We're not sure, but we're going to look into it. And then, of course, as the morning unfolded, when you looked at the Pentagon and what was happening, I mean, I don't consider myself a terribly, overtly religious person, but I got down on my knees and I started to pray.